Some mysteries begin with strange noises. Others begin with a terrifying encounter. But a few begin with something far more disturbing. A letter, not a threatening letter. Not at first, just a letter. In 2014, Derek and Maria Broaddus believed they had found their dream home. Located in the quiet town of Westfield, New Jersey, the 6-bedroom house at 657 Boulevard seemed perfect. The neighborhood was peaceful. The schools were excellent. And after years of hard work, the family had finally purchased a home they had always wanted. But before they even moved in, something happened that would turn their dream into a nightmare. One evening, Derek stopped by the house to do some painting and check on renovations. Before leaving, he opened the mailbox. Inside was a plain white envelope. Written on it were the words, "New owner." Curious, he opened the letter. What he read immediately sent chills down his spine. The letter began with a strange greeting. "Dearest new neighbor at 657 Boulevard." At first, the message seemed harmless, but then the tone changed. The writer claimed that their family had been watching the house for decades. According to the letter, the writer's father had watched the house in the 1960s, and before him, the writer's grandfather had watched it in the 1920s. Now, the responsibility had supposedly passed to them. The anonymous person referred to themselves simply as the Watcher. Then came the words that truly frightened Derek. 657 Boulevard has been the subject of my family for decades. And even more disturbing, it has been years and years since the young blood ruled the hallways of the house. The writer seemed obsessed with the property. They asked strange questions. Have you found what is in the walls yet? Will the young blood play in the basement? The family had 3 young children. How could this stranger know that? Terrified, Derek contacted police. Investigators advised him not to tell neighbors about the letter. They feared that anyone could be responsible. For the rest of that evening, Derek couldn't stop thinking about the letter. At first, he tried to convince himself it was simply a prank. Perhaps a neighbor with a strange sense of humor. Maybe someone trying to welcome the new owners in an unusual way. But the more he reread the letter, the more unsettling it became. The writer seemed to know far too much about the house. They spoke about the property almost as if it were a living thing. Not a building, not a home, but something that belonged to them. Something they had been watching for years. That night, Derek showed the letter to his wife, Maria. Both of them sat quietly reading the words over and over again. Neither could explain why the message felt so disturbing. There were no direct threats, no demands, no obvious reason for concern. Yet something about the letter felt deeply wrong. The following day, the family visited the house again. What had once felt exciting now felt different. Every window seemed to be watching them. Every passing car suddenly seemed suspicious. Even ordinary sounds felt unsettling. The house had not changed, but the way they viewed it had. For the first time, the family wondered whether someone nearby was watching their every move. And that thought was impossible to ignore. Days later, another letter arrived. This one was even more disturbing. The watcher welcomed the children by name. The writer appeared to know details that should have been impossible to know. They wrote about watching the family, watching workers, watching renovations. The message suggested that the house itself had desires, and that the arrival of children had pleased it. Fear quickly spread through the Broaddus family. Instead of moving into their dream home, they became afraid to even enter it. Private investigators were hired. Former FBI agents became involved. Police questioned neighbors. One family living nearby drew suspicion. Another neighbor had a strange interest in the house. At one point, investigators even considered whether the previous owners knew something. But every lead ended the same way. Nothing. No fingerprints. No witnesses. No answers. As police began investigating, they quickly discovered how difficult the case would be. The letter had been processed through the postal system normally. There was no obvious evidence. No fingerprints that could identify a suspect. No surveillance footage showing who had placed it in the mailbox. Investigators interviewed neighbors living near 657 Boulevard. Some were cooperative. Others appeared irritated by the attention. Every conversation produced more questions than answers. At one point, police secretly observed several homes surrounding the property. They hoped someone would reveal unusual behavior. But nothing happened. The neighborhood appeared completely normal. Yet someone clearly knew details about the Broaddus family. Someone knew when they visited the house. Someone knew about the children. And someone was close enough to watch renovations taking place. The possibility that the watcher lived only a few houses away became increasingly difficult to ignore. For Derek and Maria, that possibility was terrifying. Every neighbor became a potential suspect. Every friendly smile carried uncertainty. Every glance from across the street felt suspicious. The family no longer felt like they were moving into a dream home. Instead, they felt as though they had stepped into a mystery they could not escape. Months passed, and still the letters continued, each one signed with the same name, The Watcher. As news of the case spread, reporters descended upon Westfield. The strange story captured national attention. People became obsessed. Who was sending the letters? A jealous neighbor? Someone with mental illness? A stalker? Or someone much closer to the family than anyone suspected? The stress became unbearable. Unable to feel safe, the Broaddus family made a heartbreaking decision. They would never move into the house. Instead, they rented it out while continuing their search for answers. Years passed. Investigations continued. Lawsuits followed. The family spent enormous amounts of money trying to solve the mystery. Yet the identity of the Watcher remained hidden. Eventually, the house was sold. But the questions remained. Who had written the letters? How had they known so much? And perhaps most disturbing of all, had the mysterious Watcher ever stopped watching? Years later, the mystery remains unsolved. The letters eventually stopped, but the questions never did. Who was the Watcher? Why was the house so important to them? And how had they known so much about the family? Some people believe the culprit was a neighbor who became obsessed with the property. Others believe multiple people may have been involved. A few even suspect that the true answer has never been discovered. What makes the case so unsettling is not the letters themselves. It is the possibility that the person behind them was never caught, that they may have continued living an ordinary life while the family they terrorized struggled to move forward. Today, visitors still drive past the house. Many know its story. Many wonder what really happened. But no matter how much time passes, one fact remains unchanged. Somewhere, there was a person who watched that house. A person who wrote those letters. A person who knew far more than they should have known. And to this day, nobody knows who they were. Because sometimes, the scariest mysteries are not the ones involving ghosts or monsters. Sometimes, the scariest mystery is knowing that someone may have been watching all along, and that the Watcher was never found.